Article 9 of Japan's constitution should be amended as it does not follow the rule of law and thus does not follow the intentions in which it was created. Article 9 of Japan's constitution stipulates a renunciation of war. This article had been specifically introduced by way of amendment into Japan's constitution post-World War II. Japan had conscripted a large amount of their army from various backgrounds, including farmers, white-collar professionals, factory workers, teachers, and other professionals. In 1873, the Japanese government introduced mandatory conscription for all able-bodied men above the age of 20 to serve 3 years. During desperate times, refusal to surrender and suicidal attacks were encouraged. These were known as bonsai charges, where Japanese soldiers would charge at their enemy, shouting "Long live the Emperor" in Japanese. Japan finally surrendered unconditionally to the Allied powers, and in doing so accepted the premise of democratic reforms. Upon this, Japan accepted that their constitution would be amended. The Allied powers shared responsibility for post-surrender Japan, and it was General Douglas MacArthur who majorly shaped the rewriting of Japan's constitution. Japan's constitution was greatly amended, with one of the huge amendments surrounding the role of the Japanese emperor. The major intention of the amendments to the new Japanese constitution was to prevent the despicable atrocities of another war. A major aspect of the amendments to the post-surrender planning for Japan and was the future role of the Japanese emperor. Some allies saw Emperor Hirohito as responsible for Japan's military expansion. US diplomat and Japanese expert at the time, Hugh Borton, who helped draft planning documents for the Allied occupation of Japan, argued that retaining the emperor was the best means of gaining cooperation of the Japanese people in reform of their country. The new constitution that amended the Meiji Constitution was created in a week and was approved by the Diet with only 5 opposing votes. The post-war constitution changed the way Japan was governed and also spurred social change. Some of the biggest changes include the role of the emperor, the role of the military, and the use of the military, and women's rights. The 1947 Constitution's most celebrated innovation was Article 9. By the time the Constitution came into effect, Japan's imperial military had been dismantled and its leaders tried for war crimes. A new military was created in 1954 and named the Self-Defense Forces, SDF, with the mission of defending Japan. A new agency, the Defense Agency, was created under the Prime Minister's office to manage defense planning. The new Constitution's Article 66 banned members of the military from the highest positions of government. Japan's military was placed under the direct authority of democratically elected officials. Interpreting Article 9 created hurdles for Japan's post-war leaders. Diet debates over defense policy were contentious, with legislators often disagreeing on how to interpret Article 9. The Constitution implied limits on the force and the use of the Japanese military, a challenge that to this day still shapes decision-making on when and how the SDF can use its weapons. Japan now has the oldest unrevised constitution in the world. The interpretation of Article 9 has caused a lot of controversy in Japanese politics and global movements. In 2014, the Abe cabinet reinterpreted the constitution as allowing for collective self-defense, described as the use of force on others' behalf if Japan's security was ever threatened. The following year, the government presented legislation to the Diet that specified how this reinterpretation would be implemented. This drew both citizen protest and parliamentary opposition. Many believe that the reinterpretation has completely undermined the purpose and intention of Article 9 in Japan's constitution. Richard Nixon, when visiting Tokyo as US Vice President in 1953, referred to Article 9 as a mistake. The role and function of the SDF was slowly upgraded and expanded, till by the end of the 1990s, Japan possessed the world's fourth largest defense budget, with Japan holding a ground self-defense force, a maritime self-defense force, and air self-defense force. The technological size and sophistication of Japan's military compared to that of the United Kingdom's. Many believe that the intent and reasoning behind the 1947 amendments of Japan's constitution has been abandoned. Many argue that Japan's constitution was created so that Japan could be a pacifist state. This has clearly not happened, as Japan now has the fourth largest military in the world. Not surprisingly, the constitution of the self-defense forces has been challenged several times. Japanese lower courts have found the SDF constitutional. However, the High Court and Supreme Court has always reversed these cases and found the SDF to hold constitutional validity. An argument that Article 9 follows the rule of law or is constitutionally valid is the argument that international law holds supreme. Therefore, this would stipulate that Japan is merely following the UN Charter in Article 51, which grants each country the sovereign right to defend itself. This argument actually holds no merit, as the Japanese constitution contains a supremacy clause, as per Article 98, which reads, "This constitution shall be the supreme law of the nation, and no law, ordinance, imperial rescript, or other act of government, or part thereof, contrary to the provisions hereof, shall have the legal force or validity. The treaties concluded by Japan and established laws of nations shall be faithfully observed." The Supreme Courts are picking and choosing how to interpret Article 9 of Japan's constitution. Japan's peacekeeping efforts in Cambodia, Mozambique, the Golan Heights, Rwanda, and Honduras are all examples where Japan has now used its military to help worthy UN causes, and thus abandon the restrictions of Article 9. Japan's attitude to Article 9 portrays a choice of war, thus allowing the government to hide behind Article 9 whenever it does not wish to involve itself in war. Another clear indication of abandonment of Article 9 during 1999 against North Korea, where the chief of the Japan Defense Agency, Narita Hoshi, announced that in certain circumstances, Japan enjoyed a right of preemptive attack. The Japanese readiness to cooperate in multilateral peacekeeping efforts was acclaimed by pundits and politicians as a sign of maturity and openness. Pragmatism or realism was preferred to idealism or pacifism, and Japan's actions are viewed positively by the many countries for adopting a flexible interpretation to its constitution. Now, this is all well and good. However, it is a clear lack of regard for the rule of law. In regard to the relationship between Article 9 and self-defense, originally the first paragraph of Article 9 dealt with an affirmative, aggressive war. This paragraph had nothing to do with self-defense. However, the second paragraph prohibits Japan from having any armed forces at all. As can be clearly evaluated, there is no logical argument that the current use of the SDF can be considered constitutionally valid. Obviously, the current Article 9 of Japan's constitution does not represent the wants and the needs of the Japanese people. As already mentioned, even the USA, who originally created this amendment, encouraged Japan to stray away from Article 9's values. Changing Article 9 will be a difficult and lengthy process. However, a current solution to the issue is the Yomiuri proposal. It proposes that the first clause of Article 9, the abstract commitment to the renunciation of war as a sovereign right of the nation, and the threat of the use of force as a means of settling international disputes, is retained, But the following clause, or the following sentence, land, sea, and air force, as well as other war potential, will never be maintained, will be deleted and replaced with an unambiguous recognition of the right to possess conventional armed forces. Now, this solution would allow Japan to continue in their current regime, but would give constitutional validity to the armed forces, allow the rule of law to be upheld, and allow Japan to become a leader in international issues. Thanks.